Alright, so today's project is going to be duplicating another one of these goat feeders. We have these in 2 of our pastures now, so we're going to add it to our last pasture so we can make sure that nobody actually has to come into the pastures to feed the animals during the winter time. Get a lot of mud, a lot of rain. This should prevent us from having to come in here. You can kind of see the goats kind of intrigued by it. I just got this one put in here. So essentially what this does is this just allows, you got 1, 2, 3, 4, another goat can kind of fit in there. About 5 goats can come and eat out of this feeder at once. You can actually open up this feeder from the backside. So I'll kind of duck down here. So you can see I got a door up there and a door up here. So both of those open so you can drop the hay, drop the grain right down inside here. And then I actually mounted it to this section of the fence. So it's actually mounted to my top rail. So this feeder's not going anywhere. Easy access. Kind of see the access to it there. I got 2 gate doors that open up. Make it easy for anybody just to walk up and feed. So I got 1 more of these to build. So I'm going to go show the dimensions, kind of show how I put these together. So if you got a pasture that you're trying to avoid stuff like this, like all the mud coming in and out, here's a good way you can attach one of these to the fence. It's a freestanding feeder. Also kind of doubles as a shelter. We have a lot of our goats that'll go underneath this when it's raining and kind of keeps the rain off of them while they're eating. So we'll head out to the shop and I'll get some dimensions, get some lumber down for you, and let's get one built. Alright, so I always like to start out with a drawing to kind of get a basic idea of where I'm going here. So the basic layout, we got a frame, these are the slats for the feeder, and this is the basic for the roof. Now the roof's going to kind of change as we go depending on if you want 1 door or 2, depending on if you're going to build it the same height as I did. So I only put the 2 front braces in here. So on the first part, for the main part of the frame, you're going to need 2 of those cut at 72 inches. You're going to need 5 at 60 inches and 1 at 63. And then with the scrap left over from all of these, you're going to cut 4 of them at 8.5 inches, 2 at 18 inches, 3 at 21.5 inches, and then 2 at 12 inches. And later on, I'll kind of show how that all breaks down. Now here for the feeder slats that go across, you're going to want to come to 25 and an 1/8 overall length, and you're going to cut this angle up here, top and bottom, at 22.5 degrees. So you need a total of 6 of them at 25 and an 1/8, and they need 1 of them at 8.5 inches, and that's going to be the cheater. And again, I'll go over that a little later on in the video. And then for the basic layout for the roof, you need 2 of them at 63 inches, 2 at 48, 1 at 45, 2 at 30 3/4, and 2 at 22 3/8. And again, later on in the video, see how that cut breaks down. So there's a basic cutting list. Feel free to kind of pause this if you need it, and let's move on to getting this thing built. Alright, so here's the kind of basic layout of each of the side frames. Now I'm only going 18 inches wide on this one, and the only reason for that is I'm actually screwing this to the fence. Now normally if I have these freestanding, I'll extend this out to 2 feet just so you have a little bit more spread out, just make it a little sturdier. But I'm trying to save on some lumber because I'm mounting it to the fence. I don't need to technically be freestanding. So again, this is 18 inches from end to end. So then you got 3.5 inch overhang, so that'll be the 2x4 for the step. Now I found if you put anything too big up there, the goats will actually stand on it and they'll block other goats from eating. So just the 2x4 is just enough for them to keep their feet on to get into the feeder without being able to get up on it and stand on it and block other goats from eating. One thing I like to do with these, this is the 6-footer, this is the 5-footer. I just come through with my square, I mark 12 inches on both, and then I'll mark on the longer of the 2, which is 21.5, I'll mark 3.5 inches. So that way I know I'm going to be square with the face and with this bottom rail. And then up here, I'll mark them at 3 feet. So you're going to mark at 3 feet on both of these boards. And that's where you're going to want to put the top of this board is level at 12 inches. And the top of that board is going to be level at the 3-foot mark. It'll make a little bit more sense when I put it back together. But that's just the measurements that I'm using for the width of this one. Again, if you're going to go 2 feet, just extend it out. It'll be the same overall 3 feet up and 2 feet. The only difference is how wide you're going to make it. Alright, so here are those 8.5 inches that we cut from the scrap pieces. All I do with those is I place these directly underneath here on both sides, front and back. You can do the same thing when you build the other side. All that's doing is just giving a little bit more. So then it's kind of creating a 4x4, give a little bit more stability on the main frame. Plus it was just extra leftover scrap wood. Anything you can do to kind of beef this thing up, I think, is a good thing. Throughout this project, I'm going to kind of show you what I used all the scrap for to brace it. I really try to have the least amount of leftover scrap wood as possible whenever I do my projects. Okay, so here's both outer frames all done, screwed together. So what I'm going to get ready to do now is either the leftover 4, they're going to do the both bottoms and both top beams to kind of give it a main square, and then I'll kind of show you where we go from there. So here's kind of a basic of what it's going to look like before you stand it up. So you got your other 60 inches on the back. The one that you cut at 63 is actually going to end up being your step. So that kind of helps you put everything together. That one's going to mount flush all the way out here at the end, where the other ones are going to ride along this rail. So the other ones you're going to have, the other 60 inches, you're going to have one more up here, and you're going to have 2 more actually down here. One for the bottom row on the feeder, and another one on the inside of that where you're actually going to run your sheet of plywood on the base of it. So that kind of helps work as a catch for all the hay and all the grain. Okay, so here's the basic layout. So this is going to end up being the floor. So what you'll end up doing is taking a sheet of plywood. That'll go from this edge to this edge, running that across it. Then your feeder slats are going to go in here, which is the next thing I'll start cutting and working on that. And what that'll do is then I'm also going to put about a 4-inch or 6-inch, depending on the size of your goat, strip of plywood along the base of the back of these. So what it does is it forces the goats to step up and then put their faces in to eat. We found that that keeps them from wasting, and if they have to step up to something to put their head in, they don't just grab hay and back out, They'll actually stay there and eat. This also gives it nice because then you have the kind of a rail. You're going to end up boxing all these sides in. So now it almost makes like a little tray. So we dump the grain, and then we put the hay on top of it. Makes the goats going to go through everything. So that's how it seems to work. So the next thing we'll work on here is getting all the slats cut for the feeder, and then I'll get all the angles and everything for you from there, and then we'll start framing out the roof. Alright, I keep forgetting stuff, trying to make this as foolproof as I can so anybody can walk through step by step. So these are some of the other extra straps from the cuts from the initial cutting list, which again I'll post at the end of the video here. So this is going to be extra support leg that goes in the middle. So you can see I took my square, pre-marked where dead center is of each of these boards, slide this underneath, so now you'll have 3 legs front and back, just to give some extra support on here. In case you got any bigger, fatter goats, you don't want to worry about this board breaking here in the middle as a step. Alright, so I got the first slat installed here in the feeder. What I did for myself to make things a little bit easier is I actually took and made a little spacer. So this is going to be my gap. So this will work for like a 7-inch gap. We do want to have one that we do for 8 inches as well, depending on the size of the goats you're going to have, if they have horns or not, how old the goats are. Just kind of depends on what you're going to be using for feeding. This one works nice. I can just put my slat right up in here, then I can put my next board right up against it, keep it nice and tight, put the screws in, that I know they're all going to be equally spaced. Alright, now I know there's a mathematical way to figure out this angle. I'm a simpleton here. So what I like doing when I'm just trying to figure out my roof angle, specifically for this measurement here, for this 18-inch wide feeder, is I'll just take my drywall square and I run it to the corner of the edge of that front, back edge of that one, so that I know I'm going to have a straight cut. I'll mark this with my chuck line, and then I'll just get my skill saw and I'll just rip those down. Now I know there's like a rise and run. I know there's a way to figure out this angle. I ain't got time for all that. So this is my ghetto way of getting a quick measurement here for the roof angle. Alright, so we're just about done framing it here. So you can see I got the last slat installed. I just cut the top of it off to go right underneath that brace. I got the center brace installed in there. So the base of this is pretty much done. I just got done installing the roof. The cross members up here to support those, I just use a Craig jig. So we just got this cut. So this is an 8-inch strip. So that'll kind of keep the goats from sticking their head up and over, so they actually have to look down in here and eat. Cut this strip at 2 feet. If it's almost that, I'll pull it back here and set it flush. Now I'm going to use boards here, and I'm going to finish sealing it up on the side, and then one more along the back. And then I'm going to start working on the actual opening the gates for it here. Now I'm using this OSB. This is OSB that was this old scrap stuff I got for free. Was on some old pallets. All I had to do was come tear it apart. Use whatever you feel like, whatever's cheap. Plywood, OSB, cedar, whatever you might have lying around. If you got old scrap pallet wood, put that on the bottom. Anything you can do to save a little bit of money. Reclaim and reuse as much as possible. So I'm going to finish getting this sealed up, and then we'll go through walking through how to build the cabinet doors. Alright, getting ready to install the back piece here. Just figured I'd show this one extra brace. I decided to put one extra brace up top here, strictly because this board is 37 inches tall. So what I figured is I just measured from the base of this, went up 37 inches, so it'll be flush with the top of that. That way, less cutting is better, so then I can just cut the extra 3 feet off of this board, and then I use the excess from this 2x4 to build another brace to come up to the roof, just give me a little bit more support on it. So You know, never waste anything. Try to make it as sturdy as you can, but always try to reuse the scrap anytime you're sturdying something up. Better than just wasting it. All right, just went ahead and went through and grabbed some other scrap here. Got a little center divider installed, another little brace coming up to that. So then I can have, so this will be one door getting in, and then this will be another kind of cabinet door to get in. So all I did was just frame it in with some leftover scrap pieces that I still had from all the other stuff. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put a small strip of OSB about halfway through this upper 2x4 to seal it all the way to the metal roof on both sides. Just try to prevent as much of the water from getting down in and getting on the hay as possible. Alright, so here's how I like to build my frames. I keep it simple. I just use a 1x2, doesn't have to be anything fancy, just with a sheet of plywood over it. And then what I'm going to end up doing is my wife got me this nice little 90-degree angle jig here for Christmas, so I've been using it quite a bit. I'll probably end up buying 3 more of these. I just line these up so I can do 2 at a time. And I just pre-drill a hole just so I don't split anything. Make it so it comes flush, and then I'll just put one screw in each corner. Alright, so I got the first one framed up. So this is pretty much how I like to do it here. I like to give myself a pretty good gap just to compensate for a lot of wood swelling. Living here in Washington, it rains a lot. We get a lot of moisture. Most of the time when I cut these nice and tight, they're so tight that during the summertime there's plenty of a gap, but during the wintertime when everything gets wet, you have to really yank and pry on these doors. So I like to give myself a pretty excessive gap. Opens up nice and easy. You can see right here I just got one screw on each end here, just kind of holding them together. Going to have a sheet of plywood going around it. I'll pre-drill all my holes just so nothing cracks that little 1x. It's just to kind of guide it, just make everything go smooth. So I'll cut the OSB to overlap right through the middle of this one, and then I'll have it overlap right just the very outside of that hinge, and then overlap up on top of that. So that way it really kind of gives a good seal all the way around. Now eventually down the road I will end up redoing this entire outside of this with a row of cedar, and I'll kind of make the doors a little decorative or whatever, but this will work for now until summertime when we go pick up our cedar. Alright, just got the last couple pieces of plywood installed here. So we got 2 different doors that'll open up for feeding. One thing I did add to this feeder that I haven't done on the others is I added 2 extra sheets of plywood inside here, so it kind of makes a chute so that we know that all the hay is going to go right to the bottom. So this way in the morning, if the kids or if my nieces and nephews are by and they want to feed the animals, when they put the hay in here, this seals it right up to the feeder, so none of the hay is just going to fall out over that. So it just kind of makes the chute and goes all the way down in there. Now you can see I leave these little gaps down here at the bottom of both of these feeders. So at the end of every season, when you're getting ready to kind of clean this out, any old dirty stuff in there, you can take out the worst of it and then you just brush down the rest of it and it just kind of falls out. So makes it kind of nice for keeping it clean. Alright, so here's the front of the feeder. So we got room for, you can see right there, get over this big dog's head. Got room for 5 goats to eat out of this feeder. You can see the 2 new pieces of plywood that I used up here kind of creating that chute. That also gets a good wind barrier, so we don't have to worry about goats or any of the weather kind of blowing up over the hay. The other thing I'm kind of thinking of is kind of nice because now the goats can't try to jump up and get into the feeder, which goats are known to do that. We've found goats in there before. I ended up using just a couple of basswood slats here on the bottom instead of plywood. I had some old 1x6s. So I actually made the gap at the bottom of the feeder is actually 10 inches. I'm going to see how that goes with the smaller goats. Might end up having to adjust it a little bit depending on how they go and how they eat out of it, but we'll just have to see. Alright, so here we are at the pair of feeders. Just got both of these done, both of these installed out here. Got all the goats on the way over and getting ready to feed. This feeder's already got hay in it, so I'm going to take this feeder, I'm going to put some hay and some grain in it, and hope these guys all stick their heads in there and kind of get a good idea how these guys all eat out of here. Alright, so here's everybody eating out of it. So you can see everybody just has to step up, and they got to put their hooves down here on this front step, and they got to put their faces down in there and eat out of it. So 4 goats easily, and then you get the 5th one in there, no problem.